Questions about manufacturing or via oxidation as reported by tech outlets.
Thanks, Steve.
Intel just admitted oxidation issues with its 13th gen CPUs, but this only comes after first publishing a half-complete statement addressing only the voltage issues. That means the media gets to run with the voltage story, while Intel could then append the oxidation issue to a Reddit post after people already went to press with the voltage issues. Options for this strange series of choices might include things like general disorganization within the company of how to deal with this, panic, general incompetence, or, and we can't speak to the motive, but maybe something more calculated, in my opinion. Now, if you're not familiar with that latest revelation of oxidation, we broke the story on possible oxidation of the vias within the CPU occurring during gate formation process and began talks with the failure analysis lab. Intel has now officially confirmed that oxidation was at one point a problem. But it's not the only one. This comes alongside a notification from Intel of microcode changes, and this will also bear with it some motherboard BIOS changes from the motherboard vendors. And so the two of these in combination are part of the instability problem. So speaking with Wendell, it's possible there's other aspects of the instability of Intel CPUs as well, but it seems like these are the two that at least Intel's addressing right now. Now, somewhat disgustingly, from my viewpoint, Intel rejected at least some RMAs for B2B and some B2C CPUs during the period at which they knew oxidation was a problem. But from everything we've heard from our contacts, before the contacts, the business partners, were aware of the oxidation problem. So this period is critical because if there's any rejected RMAs, when Intel knows about it, but the partners don't, it's really just inexcusable. It's like ASUS treatment, where the company must revisit all of the rejected RMAs, and it needs to reprocess them to evaluate whether those customers were actually owed replacements with everything that Intel knows today. That includes the voltage problems, and that includes the oxidation issues. And this is, just frankly speaking, this is Intel's biggest fuck up that I have personally reported on in the 16 years or so that we've been doing this. And the company it's behaving irresponsibly. It is slow for an issue that's important and requires confidence in what support is being provided to customers, not just a blanket statement of we're committed to supporting our customers, whatever that means, but something actually firm written down saying what those commitments are. And that includes business customers as well. But speaking to the business customers, some of Intel's largest ones, like big OEMs, were not made aware of the oxidation issue until just this year. And this is something that Intel said was in 2023 that it was happening. So if that's the case, then it just looks bad, to be the most charitable possible with that. Or like a cover-up, but let's get into it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermalright and the Frozen Prism 360 liquid cooler. Thermalright's Frozen Prism is one of the most affordable liquid coolers on the market and is able to achieve competitive results with a high cold plate convexity that applies pressure centrally to the silicon area based on our testing. This works on both AMD and Intel. We previously benchmarked the Frozen Prism and found that it's overall competitive for its price point. The cooler comes in a few color variations, it has a blackout option and an RGB option, and it's the cheapest liquid cooler we've tested anytime recently that still hits performance markers. Learn more at the link in the description below. This is pretty simple today. So Intel posted a statement claiming only the voltage and microcode changes initially. This is what it said. Based on extensive analysis of Intel Core 13th and 14th gen desktop processors returned to us due to instability issues, we have determined that elevated operating voltage is causing instability issues in some 13th and 14th gen desktop parts. Our analysis of returned processors confirms that the elevated operating voltage is stemming from a microcode algorithm resulting in incorrect voltage requests to the processor. Intel is delivering a microcode patch which addresses the root cause of exposure to elevated voltages. We are continuing validation to ensure that scenarios of instability reported to Intel regarding Core 13th and 14th gen desktop processors are addressed. Intel is currently targeting mid-August for a patch release to partners following full validation. The statement concludes with this, quote, Intel is committed to making this right with our customers, and we continue asking any customers currently experiencing instability issues on their Core 13th and 14th gen desktop processors to reach out to Intel customer support for further assistance. Now, this statement said nothing of oxidation. It was fully focused on microcode and excessive voltage. Oxidation is a physical hardware level defect. It would not be fixable in microcode. It's something that happens during the fabrication process. So any chips that were affected by oxidation of the vias are likely going to be subject to corrosion and potentially instability as a result of that corrosion, and maybe eventual chip failure, because it's not something you can just patch out. The lack of a comment on oxidation, combined with the clear language where they said they root caused it to voltage, it makes it sound like oxidation was not part of the story and that it was fully voltage, which is unintentionally at best misleading, or again, deliberately misleading and manipulative. So we're not sure what it is. I can't speak to their motive, but certainly I have some opinions, and it again just does not look good. It is not congruent with a company that wants the transparency of these issues. Intel's statement also completely fails to say how exactly they are going to support customers, dropping the ball on every single possible level. The community needs the transparency on what, quote, committed to making this right with our customers actually means, because that means fuck all at this point. And there's a problem where these companies like to put out statements about we're gonna support and make it right and whatever, but without a hard commitment of what that means, active outreach to people. Actually, I have a list for Intel, so we'll make this easy. Intel, here's the roadmap that I'd like to see. First of all, the affected date range of the CPUs has to be out there. And if it's not fully known with certainty what's affected, at least a suspected date range, where if it's in this date that you bought it or it was manufactured via the manufacturer code, then possibly it is affected. So for the voltage and the microcode problem, that might mean effectively all of them. We don't know. For the oxidation problem, there is a specific window before Intel fixed it. And I will talk about this later, but the good thing with the oxidation problem is any manufacturing level defect is something that once it's fixed, it should just be fixed, and permanently so for everything made after that. So it's a really bad problem in the sense that it's a hardware level defect. It'll affect everything potentially. And there may be uncertainty as to which ones got through without that problem and which ones got through with it. But it's a good thing in the sense that once it's resolved, it's resolved. So they need to have an affected date range of CPUs for both of these. They need to have a serial number range or lookup tool. Intel has tools on its website for warranty services. You can type in some characters on the CPU lid and get information about the warranty. They should apply that to this and make it so that you could type it in and it spits out a you might be affected or you are not affected. And maybe it's that simple. Maybe they can't confirm it's affected, but at least saying maybe and no would help a lot and ease some anxiety for customers. We'd also like to see a commitment to warranty extensions offered to users of CPUs affected, and a commitment to warranty extensions for users who experience degradation. Likewise, if the microcode changes affect performance in any capacity, we would expect an offer of a full refund, because if you're buying something that doesn't perform as it was reviewed and advertised, then that's just fair. At this time, however, I really want to emphasize this. We don't know if there's going to be a performance change. It's possible they can affect the voltage tables without changing anything for the actual CPU performance, but we'll really need to see and independently validate that. And one of the concerns I have here is if users are unaware of these microcode changes and unaware of the need to update BIOS, most users, they kind of buy or build their system and then ignore all of this stuff and go on with their lives, and that's probably a good way to do things, but those people will not be informed on this issue, which is unfortunate, because this is something where if their CPU is being exposed to excessive voltage, it will over time potentially exhibit this instability and maybe just stop working at the spec that it's set for. So what we'd like to see is some kind of active outreach, and options for that might include going through motherboard partners, going through retail partners, posting on social media, making sure the press is aware of this, which includes transparency and all these other things we talk about, to make sure everyone's aware of it so that Intel can minimize its liability and minimize its legal exposure to the extent possible long term by trying to get in front of these failures by notifying everyone. Back to the statement though, like we said, it said nothing of oxidation. In fact, it said that it had identified the root cause of stability as being excessive voltage or related to it. But it did update its statement on Reddit, where its comments are more likely to go under the radar for investors and media. I didn't see it until someone sent it to me. Here's what it said. Quote, so that you don't have to hunt down the answer. Questions about manufacturing or via oxidation as reported by tech outlets.
Thanks, Steve.
Quote, short answer, we can confirm there was a via oxidation manufacturing issue addressed back in 2023, but it is not related to the instability issue. At first, this is just more unclear language from Intel. Back in 2023 is an incredibly wide range. In fact, you might say it's almost about a year. And that's a huge amount of time. It'd be nice to actually know what that range was. Intel failed to provide any date codes, any means to identify potentially affected CPUs. Again, it might not have affected all of them that went through it, but we don't know. And that's the point of the transparency. So while it's good that they've confirmed this publicly for the first time, and really just within days of it becoming a public pressure issue, it's unfortunate that it took a year to do so. And they've also, once again, failed to provide any means to actually do something with this information as a consumer. So Intel continued with this, quote, long answer. We can confirm that the via oxidation manufacturing issues affected some early Intel Core 13th Gen desktop processors. However, the issue was root caused and addressed with manufacturing improvements in screens in 2023. We have also looked at it from the instability reports on Intel Core 13th Gen desktop processors, and the analysis to date has determined that only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue. For the instability issue, we are delivering a microcode patch which addresses exposure to elevated voltages, which is a key element of the instability issue. We are currently validating the microcode patch to ensure the instability issues for the 13th and 14th gen are addressed. So if you didn't catch it, Intel is contradicting itself in these statements with some slippery phrasing. In Intel's first statement, it attributed the root cause only to voltage, and it pointed to a solution as a microcode update. In Intel's short answer version of that Reddit comment, it said, quote, it is not related to the instability issue, referring to oxidation, but its long answer, which was in the same comment, said, quote, only a small number of instability reports can be connected to the manufacturing issue, again relating to oxidation. So these are incongruent with each other because they are absolute statements. It is not connected, and then only some of them are connected. The only sum wipes out that it is not, obviously. So that means it is at least somewhat related to the instability issue. And then, of course, the excessive voltage is one that path everyone's kind of been on for months now at this point, alongside the power behavior. PL1, PL2 actually were before the voltage discussion. So the power side of things was kind of the one that seemed like it's likely there's a problem here because Intel's been pushing the power so high and running too close to the limit. But the oxidation thing is a separate issue that appears to have at least affected some of them for instability, according to Intel. And again, we don't know how many. The contact we had in our previous piece assumed that they would have a range of 10 to 25% affected by instability that they thought might be attributable to the oxidation issue. And a company that size, the scale is in the hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of processors. So we're not sure how big a small number is. And it's possible whatever they had going on with instability issues was related to oxidation at a lower percentage and the voltage and the other problems. But either way, Intel immediately faced some pressure in the Reddit post. Matt of Alderon Games asked this, quote, any ideas on why we had server providers who ran into faulty CPUs in 2023 get rejected around the time you mentioned the oxidation manufacturing issue? After 2 years of being handed rejected RMAs, contacting customer support again and hoping to not get rejected again is getting quite annoying. And this is really bad. This is why Intel has to go back in time and reevaluate all the RMAs from this period, kind of like ASUS just did, and start rectifying those situations, especially now that they've admitted they knew there were problems back then. They knew the oxidation was a thing in 2023, just wrote it. And then voltage, they at least publicly say they know about as of a couple days ago. So this is something that has to be rectified for customers who were unfairly rejected for claims, and that is not something Intel has put in its commitment to support customers. Additionally, Dylan Brown, Unreal Engine supervisor at Model Farm, wrote this, quote, "For anyone curious at work, our failure rate for our 13900K and 14900K machines is about 50% so far. Any new machine builds going to be 9950Xs. Production environments need reliability," end quote. Wendell asked Dylan Brown for more information on things like motherboards affected, to which Brown responded with this, quote, "Fairly sure most are ROG ones. They haven't fully failed, but exhibit the instability even when lowering power limits. Haven't tested new BIOSes yet. We first noticed the instability, crashes that appeared to be GPU related, but swapping GPUs didn't seem to help. Finally clicked when the news started coming out about this issue and made much more sense. At the time, we tried reducing the power limits and such, which didn't really help. We have many identical machine builds, and some were completely fine while others were extremely unstable." So that's another note for this approximately 50% instability issue that pops up. Now, there's a lot of sampling bias here. It's possible that there are other problems at play too, which I only soften because 50% is such an enormous percentage that it seems unfathomable, but that is now multiple groups that have said a number like that or close to it. Wendell, when he presented his one server client who had a claimed approximate 50% instability failure rate, softened it by saying that he thought maybe half of those would be recoverable. That might be with something like microcode, so that would bring it down to, say, 25%. Either way, very large numbers. I mean, even really anything over 1 is an enormous percentage for a failure rate of something like a CPU. So we would believe that a lot of the instability is recoverable with the microcode update and with the BIOS updates. The concerns I have are more long-term, like for ones that have been running for a while, it may have some kind of permanent damage. And just obviously, for these B2B customers, especially game developers and publishers, where you have server providers who have difficulty with server stability, players get pissed off, you have maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages from players abandoning the game, thinking that it's the game's fault, the programmer who built the netcode, whatever it is. And these are big costs that are thanks to Intel.
Back to you, Steve.
All right, back to the statement. So also of note, Intel did not name the 14th gen for CPUs that it thinks were affected by oxidation. And in that Reddit post, the Intel employee who was commenting seemed to effectively explicitly state that it was a 13th gen issue that was resolved there. Now, our source for the oxidation story gave us a list of only 13th gen CPUs. If you put that back up on the screen from the last one, the source was, as we said at the time, concerned it might affect 14th gen, but the list that they had was 13 only. I think it was 11 CPUs. So it seems like 14th gen is at least affected by microcode and voltage issues, but may be clear of the oxidation issues. This is a huge problem for Intel. We appreciate that they finally disclosed what's going on at some level. It's not enough, but it's better than complete silence. It did take immense public pressure to finally get them to an answer. It was bad enough that large customers of Intel were starting to leak to us information about how bad it was because they didn't feel like they were getting the support they needed. If you think about that, really, how big of a statement that is for these huge customers. And when I say huge, I mean like not ASUS and MSI, but bigger than those. If they start contacting media, there's really only a few reasons that'll happen. Of course, you've always got the one where someone might just want to be involved in some big story or expose. We try to filter that as best we can. But typically what it comes down to is it is best for every business in the relationship, so that'd be Intel and their partners, to just stay quiet and fix it quietly so that neither one of them affects the confidence in the product that's being sold, whether that's the customer using an Intel product or Intel itself. And so if it eventually does get out to media, that is indicative of maybe how big the problem is. So the oxidation issue, to come back to that one, is good in the sense that it is resolvable in kind of one swoop, where it is a fab level change. As far as I understand it, it's kind of binary. It's either fixed or it's problematic, and Intel says it's fixed. It's concerning, of course, we don't know how wide-reaching it is, but at least that one's probably resolved. Our failure analysis lab sources have indicated it's possible for oxidation of the vias to cause additional problems with time or worsen the stability with time and create longer-term failures. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. As for the lab, we have at least one CPU where we've pinpointed the region of the CPU that is problematic. We're not sure if it's a voltage thing or if it's an oxidation thing. We're going to send that out to them. I have not fully locked in that contract yet, so it's not guaranteed we're going to have an FA report. They're going to need to get me a cost estimate, but we're going to still try and do one. At this point, though, it would just be academic and to learn because Intel's already confirmed the problem. So it's not a mystery anymore, but it'd still be cool just to try and understand the scope of it and get some educational material for us and for you all. All right, what's next? So here are the immediate items for consumers to know. This is the part that you should care about. These CPUs might be toxic on the used market. It's kind of an interesting point, but you should be careful to check with sellers that they are stable and not being sold because they're unstable. And remember that sellers might lie to you, especially ones on the internet you don't know. So that's a great accidental way to reduce secondhand competition for new chips for Intel and AMD, but if you're a buyer of secondhand, you need to be careful. 2, if you own any 13th or 14th gen CPUs, you should immediately update the BIOS, and you should keep an eye out for Intel microcode changes. Intel said that this will be in August, so these can be pushed a few different ways, but a BIOS update, let's say late August, should effectively guarantee it's been applied, and you can check your motherboard manufacturer's BIOS notes to see if they explicitly address it to give you some confidence. 3, if you experience any system instability at all, and you have been using the CPU for a little while, and you have no reason to suspect it's some other problem like malware or whatever, then our guidance, GN's guidance, would be to immediately apply for an RMA. Even if you think it might be Windows, you really don't want to be caught with a degraded chip, and Intel should be responsible for its mess anyway, so if they replace excessive CPUs, then that's their own fault. As a recap of the problems, here's kind of an FAQ based on some of the comments we've seen on the internet the last few days. So 1, oxidation, that is a physical issue. It can't be fixed with microcode. 2, the oxidation can lead to instability and failure. 3, CPUs should no longer have this problem, as it would have been resolved at the fab level, and it would not persist once fixed. 4, Intel indicates that the 14th series is unaffected by this. And then some FAQ for the voltage issues. So first of all, long-term excessive voltage can cause irreparable damage. Typically, this would manifest as the inability to maintain the same clocks at the same voltages. So overclocking is my best example of this. It's the only real area I've seen this applicable. But in the OC world, the fix would be to reduce the clocks, or you'd have to pump the voltage more to maintain the same clocks. Now, this is just one type of that kind of failure. I'm sure there can be other types. But in that manifestation of it, it ends up being sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of degradation, so the better move would be to reduce both. For new CPUs, or those which have not been exposed to excessive voltage for long periods, microcode and a BIOS update should theoretically resolve all of these concerns. And if you haven't used your CPU much and you don't see any instability, we'd recommend just applying the BIOS and the microcode updates mid-August to, let's say, late August, maybe do it again just in case they make a change, and then move on. Because if you don't think you're affected because you don't see instability, it's relatively new, it hasn't had a lot of uptime, then just, I don't want people like feeling this constant anxiety about it, so make a decision, move on, and apply the updates, move on, hopefully it doesn't affect you, or I guess dump the part, return it if you can, if that's how you feel. But whichever one it is, if it's a new part and it hasn't seen a lot of use, I would say just either apply the updates and move on and forget about it, or get rid of it. For CPUs which are already experiencing instability, microcode and BIOS updates may resolve it, or they may at least help. If they resolve it, I still, we have a certain level of responsibility. A lot of people watch these videos, a lot of people buy parts, make decisions based on what we say. And for that reason, I have to err on the side of caution with this, where I don't feel confident or comfortable saying that it would stop any future instability if you have already had signs of some level of degradation or instability. It's possible you just have instability without degradation, but I can't know that. Realistically, you can't either. And so my blanket recommendation there would be an RMA, and just get a new one and apply them if they're not, apply the BIOS update, and then move forward from there. That way it's kind of out of your mind. That's how I would operate, because I'd want to just have the confidence that, okay, this should be about as resolved as it can reasonably be resolved. I am moving on with my life. That's how I'd approach it. So that's all I can really recommend. I don't want to appear like I'm being overly concerned about it, but again, if you're experiencing any instability that appears maybe CPU related, that's my personal approach to it. So take that for what you want. All right, for testing, our plan is to benchmark them under still the same Intel official guidance. for PL1 and PL2. Intel is indicating August for the microcode updates. Unfortunately, this is after the Zen 5 reviews. That means that I don't really care what Intel says. I don't care if they say there's no impact to performance. We still need to independently verify it. So, and to be clear, at this time we're filming, they haven't made a commitment as to if it affects performance or not. So we're going to test them with the official guidance, but we can't evaluate the microcode until it ships. So we're going to have to revisit it in August and see how it is then. Because of all of that, our blanket statement right now is an avoidance of recommending any Intel 13th and 14th gen CPUs. Once the microcode update goes out, we can retest for differences, and we'll also need to see some firm commitments from Intel as to what specifically committed to supporting their customers means. When we get those things, hopefully a lack of performance changes, and then hopefully some firm commitments on the warranty, we will reconsider the stance of whether or not we can comfortably recommend Intel CPUs, and we'll let you all know as soon as that stance changes. It'll be the first thing I say in a hardware news episode or something. So finally, this voltage issue does not describe all instability. We think there's more to it. Likely that comes with motherboards as well, doing some of their own screwy things. There's probably a lot of things to this problem, and some chips that Wendell has have not been, he thinks, exposed to excessive voltage, but are still unstable. So it's possible it's the oxidation issue for some of those 13th gen ones, but it could be something else entirely. So we'll continue to follow the story. I think that's kind of it for now. It's a mess. It's a big mess for Intel. It's a huge problem. You know, the fab level defect is both good and bad. It's bad because it happened. It's good because it's fixable relatively in a relatively binary way as far as I understand. I don't know anything about manufacturing, but that's my understanding of it. And I'd say that's about it. So Zen 5 review is coming soon. Intel will be on the charts, but we'll revisit this in August with the microcode. And that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Support us directly on store.gamersnexus.net. You can grab one of our PC building anti-static mod mats with screw tracking grids, cable pinouts, 2-scale memory diagrams, CPU die location just for some educational material and more. Or you can grab one of our t-shirts, our commemorative pint glasses with the GM 3D emblem, and our 3D coasters. All of that supports our reporting directly and our independent work. So thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.